Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are threatening revenge for bin Laden's death, and U.S. officials expect the backlash. And they are telling Americans to be vigilant at home and overseas. Political analyst Carl Jeffers has been following the long search, this hunt for bin Laden. He joins us now in the studio with a little perspective. I guess, you know, part of it is there's a little sense of relief, but then there's also this tension in our spine, if you will, of, oh my gosh, what is going to happen next to us?
Well, I think that on that score, Anna, that we could relax a bit because with the event happening yesterday and with the splintering and disintegration of the Al-Qaeda group over the last few years, remember, he had no internet service at the palace, he had no phone service, only couriers. So he has not been actively involved in planning and plotting. That in reality is, it would be at least 6 months before they could actually implement an incident of terrorism directly at us here in the United States. So even though it's important to have vigilance and the security has been raised, the reality is I could not see anything of consequence happening for at least several months because they would not have time to plan it in a way that would make it possible for it to be successful. So that's important. In terms of long term, I think that this will serve in some ways to present Osama bin Laden as a martyr, and that will help to recruit young Muslim males who has been their primary target all along. And this will serve to increase their interest in getting involved in becoming long-term enemies to fight against the United States.
So what happens to the relationship with Pakistan? Because it looks a little potentially embarrassing for Pakistan that this was happening under their nose. The question is, did they let it happen under their nose, or did they look the other way?
Well, I think that there's a mixed signal there. Our national security advisor, Dr. Brennan, has indicated, and it is true, that Pakistan has actually killed more terrorists over the last 10 years than any other country, and it is by a wide margin that they have led the effort to fight terrorism and to apprehend and indeed kill counterterrorism. On the other hand, this was essentially a palace that he was living in. It had been expanded over the last few years with a private wall. They took care of their own trash. They were in a suburban community, and they continually added to the compound, and they were only 30 miles from the capital of the country.
And right by an academy, a military training academy and a military
That's right.
base.
It is almost inconceivable that there wasn't some support group within the government of Pakistan that was aware of this entire compound and that Osama bin Laden was there, and in fact, in some ways, were in collusion with him to keep him protected. So that is a question that the Pakistanis will have to answer, but they can balance some of it with the fact that we do appreciate, and the president made a point of acknowledging this last night, that we do appreciate that they have been an erstwhile partner in the fight against terrorism over the last several years.
So now what happens with the military operation in Afghanistan? What happens with the Taliban? What happens with Iraq? What happens with Libya? I know everything, they're very distinct, but we have battles on different fronts right now for the United States. So how does this affect all of those interests?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned several of them. I'll just hit them as quickly as I can with each one.
Okay.
With regard to Libya, there may in fact be a motivation now for Gaddafi to consider some sort of exit because he is impressed with how precisely we were able to pinpoint Osama bin Laden and take him out. And, you know, NATO seems to be pretty aggressive. They're not being as careful as our Navy SEALs were in the attacks that they've been instituting already. So clearly, Gaddafi may have reason now to say, I need to look at another exit. With regard to Afghanistan, we have to remain vigilant. With regard to the entire Arab world, I think that we can look forward to continuation of where we are now, the status quo. Why? Because it's been this way for the last several years. It's not like we dethroned someone who has been actively running an operation. He's been in the background, he's been splintered, and so we still have to contend with that even with his absence.
All right, Carl Jeffers, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Always learn something.
Okay, look forward to that. And we can still look at the political impact here at home, where the president's going to be much stronger now. And Leon Panetta is now the new Secretary of Defense. He was CIA director. He was running this operation for the past year, planning it. This will enhance his ability, take over over the fence and make the cuts the president wants, and it reduces the potential elements of opposition by Republicans. The president is much stronger now going into 2012.
Very good point, and thank you so much for adding that. We appreciate that. Well, the news of bin Laden's death swept through the internet like wildfire. Social media had a lot to say about the news of his death. We'll bring you a reaction when we return.